Hi, welcome to One Life Mechanics, where we are talking about the catatonic state. So, first of all, what is it? Usually, it's when someone is experiencing an inability to move. They're not necessarily aware of that. They might have found themselves resting in what is seemingly a very uncomfortable looking position. This person might have just gone nonverbal. They may not be interested in speaking. They might be zoned out and seemingly just not really in their body. They're not really there. And part of that is perhaps an explanation that isn't well understood by Western medicine, but that can be somewhat explained by Eastern. So the first part is that even though someone might have gone nonverbal, sometimes that can be a state of extreme presence depending on what they are experiencing and how well they are understanding their experience. So the first part is that being catatonic might be a defense mechanism, meaning that the body or perhaps the brain specifically has gone into this state in order to repair itself. So sometimes the most healing in the body happens when a person is asleep. And because of that, a person that's in a catatonic state might sort of be absent in order for the body to heal. So in order to create new brain pathways, to let go of some old ones, that person just might not be there. And some of that could be dissociation for sure, but the explanations are far too varied for one answer to be the catch-all for something that's so complex. In Lee Sanella's book, Kundalini, Psychosis or Transcendence, this doctor does a series of studies on meditators and takes a survey of some of their more unusual states and records them in this book. But some people, after meditating for several months, start to see lights in their head, or they come out of their meditation and they find themselves in very strange body positions that they don't remember getting themselves into. And so there isn't really no conclusion in that particular book. However, in Eastern philosophy, there is something that is called body electronics, or more specifically, more anciently, mudras. Mudras being like different hand positions or finger connections that stimulate the body into connecting within itself electrically in ways that maybe are not very common, but it stimulates the brain in different ways. So because the body is a very electrical system, becoming catatonic might be just one of those things that happens when someone is rearranging their electrical system. And waking up in different positions, even yoga positions, is something that would make sense if the body is attempting to heal itself. So that's not something that is necessarily unheard of. It's just that there's a lot of times when people experience things so strange that they rarely talk about it with other people, but people may be experiencing various aspects of a catatonic state in different aspects of their life. Perhaps they've gone through a loss and they just feel very zoned out and emotionless for a few days. Or maybe in the case of my life coach, he was sent to Afghanistan, and when he came back, he did a lot of meditating and also found himself in different yoga positions that he doesn't remember getting into and seeing different colors. I myself have experienced moments where I felt so present that I just didn't feel like speaking. It's not that I forgot how to, but in the middle of my wake up experience, I just didn't feel like talking. And that really disconcerted people around me because they were not there. They didn't understand. And in addition to that, these people are often putting out an unusual frequency range of their own brain chemistry. And that alone can disconcert the general populace in ways that are not favorable, because then all kinds of drugs to bring them out of that state are introduced to a brain with already unusual chemistry, and that can exacerbate the problem or create new issues. So what is actually happening in that state? Well, some of it is that the metabolism has indeed slowed down to a point where unusual states of awareness are happening. Or maybe the person is just not there at all. It really depends on what aspect of the catatonic world or spectrum one is in. So some of that might be a lack of sleep for sure, but some of it is the metabolism has done something rather interesting that isn't very dissimilar from meditating monks in the mountains. I'm sure you've all heard of stories in which monks will go to different caves and sit for days and days meditating. Well, what happens is if they continue doing that, their metabolism will slow down. The body does not waste energy, and if it is no longer required to move physically, then why keep the metabolism running at a high level enough to move or to speak? And so it starts shutting down. And if the meditator continues to sit anyways, they go into a very, very, very deep meditation, basically asleep, in which they begin to dream. But they're not dreaming because they're dreaming consciously, probably while sitting up. They don't have to be, and in some cases they might be lying down, in which case their followers would take care of them. They would wash their body, they would dress it, they would turn it over every once in a while to make sure bed sores aren't happening. It depends on the discipline and what part of the world, what their traditions are. But that is not something that is unheard of. Even in Game of Thrones, there were a few episodes during which Adriana Stark, she went into this cloister, and yeah, there were people that were seemingly asleep for days that these caretakers were washing. That's kind of a good picture of what the catatonic state is in an extreme case, where they're just sort of asleep or zoned out or dazed, and they're just not there. But that is a result of a very slow metabolism, right? So what was the Chinese solution to all that? Well, there was this amazing thing that happened at some point where the monks themselves discovered the power of caffeinated Chinese tea. And originally, this tea was used by monks to speed up their metabolism, to help them concentrate during long stints of meditation. It gave them clarity, it gave them awareness, it helped them to stay awake, which is often an issue for beginning meditators, is it's very difficult to stay awake. The soul is not used to this type of awareness with physical immobility. The body was meant to move. So their solution was tea. And one of the amazing properties of tea and why it became so valued was because it helped to increase the qi, or electrical activity of the body, without a whole lot of movement, a lot of whole physical movement. Normally, one would have to do vigorous exercise to get qi to move that fast, or intentional movement with the mind. But tea was one of those things that increased the amount of chi or electrical conductivity in the body without too much effort and helped it to continue moving. So what's interesting about tea is that it has a lot of different phenols in it. It's not just caffeine. There are chemicals that will help to calm a person down, to bring them to a feeling of centeredness, peace, balance, emotional harmony. If someone is actually too hyper, drinking tea will calm them down. It's not a matter of just getting to some kind of high point and maintaining that. With tea, the caffeine is released at a much slower rate, not to mention lower rate than coffee. And because it's more of a slow release, the energy is sustained. So in the case of tea, it is a powerful tool to bring someone out of a catatonic state. Sometimes the plant world has a very simple solution for a very complex issue, which is the chemistry of the human body, more specifically the brain, which is by far the most complex system. So in order to bring a person out of that, maybe the best solution is to just give them a hot cup of tea. And really, there are a whole lot of uses for that state to begin with. In Africa, there is a plant called iboga, perhaps you've heard of it, which of course induces psychedelic states of being, but if taken for a prolonged amount of time, or perhaps in very high doses, assuming that the practitioner really knows what they're doing, sometimes it is intentionally used to induce a catatonic state, meaning that they take this drink or this plant, they lie down, and they really just don't come back for a week or two. It could be a very long time in which people might need to physically take care of them. And what are they even doing while they're out there? Well, they might be talking to various councils, receiving healings, getting insight into different problems that are presenting themselves in the world, understanding where the future is going, etc., etc. So sometimes these states are intentionally induced in order to experience more of the universe than what is available when we are more aware of our physical senses. And certainly being in a nonverbal state lends itself to thinking without words, which in and of itself will cause the brain to behave in unusual ways and perceive the world in a new and different perspective. So these aren't things that are necessarily without their uses. And it needs to be treated as such, because when we are able to think with feeling, without words, without images, perhaps the level of our own awareness and experience is far more enhanced than what we experience on a day in which speech is possible. So it's not necessarily something that needs to be feared, but perhaps better understood. Particularly in the case of needing to be healed or needing to experience the inner world more, to understand ourselves more. Sometimes being in the catatonic state might just be the answer, because it is the place where we can experience ourselves the most profoundly. But in the end, the spirit really does want to experience the world. And because of that, certainly locking people in mental institutions for prolonged amounts of time when they get to experience next to nothing is not the answer. Taking them out into nature is always going to be a profound part of that answer. Giving them something to do, colors, sights, dance, etc. The somatic world is one of the few things that can bring someone out of the catatonic and into perhaps a more creative aspect of themselves that they were needing to access. So movement, physical movement, is important, but you still have to inspire them to want to do it. So giving them a hot cup of tea is most certainly part of that solution, but just allowing them to be in that state for at least, some time until maybe they're ready to come out of it is also of importance, and to respect that their body, their soul, their whatever put them there for a reason, and to only bring them out of that when it's necessary. But certainly things like music, nature, dance, color, visual performances of all kinds is going to be something that arouses their system into perhaps being more interested in interacting with the rest of the world. But it's also important to be sensitive to the fact that they are there for a reason, and to be curious about their experience is far more valuable than to assume that there is no reason for it at all. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that this talk has brought some clarity to this state and why people might be in it, and I will see you next time. Thank you.